I'm Hayley from Story Brewers, and today I'll be playing our new little box game, Saltfish and Almanacs. Saltfish and Almanacs is a game about travelling merchants making their yearly rounds through new and familiar places. You'll peddle your goods town to town on a journey of self-discovery and wonder. You can play Saltfish and Almanacs with 1 to 4 players, but today I'm going to be playing the solo version of the game. It uses the same core rules as the 2, 3, and 4 player versions, so when you know how to play one, you're basically ready to play them all. It's not the only one of our little box games that does have solo play. Village Song also has a solo mode, so if you want more solo games, you can check that out. Okay, so let's dive into it. So the first thing we need to do in a game of Saltfish and Almanacs is to create our merchants. And the way we do this is we start with 2 choices. We need to choose our merchant company, and we need to choose our hometown. We'll start with our merchant company since that's going to be more influential on the character that we create today. At the moment, we have 3 merchant companies to choose from, but a 4th company has already been unlocked as a stretch goal on the Kickstarter, so I look forward to creating that down the track. The 3 options I have today are the Hearthfire Traders, who are a family or found family of merchants who've been doing this for a long time, the Venturas Collective, who are a group of childhood friends starting something new together, and the Spirit Folk Fellows, who are a fellowship of folklore beings traveling the world in the guise of humans to find out what it is humanity is all about. For today, I'm going to be choosing the Hearthfire Traders, so let me tell you a little bit more about them. The yearly sojourn is an important family tradition. While home is sorely missed, there's a network of friends and family eager to help with a deal or ply you with potato cakes. You keep your promises and remember the names of everyone's children. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to choose the hometown that my character is going to be from. And there are a lot of options for me to choose from here. So I'm going to have to think about what kind of town my trader might be from and then find one that fits. I think it's going to be a inland town, not a port town. A quiet place where the rhythm of life is slow. But it's got to be somewhere fairly established since my family have been traders for a long time. I think from the options that I have, the one that fits best is Rowstock. For visitors, Rowstock is wine and rustic elegance. But to us, it is a gentle flowing river, happiest as it reflects the golden dust light. There is beauty in everything, reads the old sign by the entryway. Okay, so now I have my company and my hometown. We are the Hearthfire Traders of Rowstock. I'm ready to start creating my character. So step 1 is to form my family. So if I was playing with more people, we would form a family together. But since it's just me, I'm going to imagine what place my character might have in a larger family. So your family or found family, your lively house is constantly expanding to fit new additions. Choose one or make your own. Now here I have a number of character prompts to choose from. And there's 6 options here, but the ones that I am leaning towards is either newly full grown, which I imagine to be somebody who's setting out on their first journey by themselves, so that could be quite fun. Or soon to be retiree, somebody who's setting out maybe on their last journey. I think of those 2 options, I'm really drawn to soon to be retiree because I'm feeling like a person like that is going to have a lot of history behind them. And that's something that I really want to explore during the game. The connections that they've made and what it means to say goodbye to that lifestyle and those connections as they are on their final trip. So the next thing I need to do to establish more about my merchant is to choose a quality that they share with other people from their hometown and one that they don't. So on my hometown card, I can see that the people of Rowstock are thought to be patient, elegant, sunny, and quaint. I need to pick one of these that describes my character and one of these that really doesn't. I feel like, since my character has been on the road for many years, they are now a patient person. I don't think they always were, but I think it definitely describes them nowadays. However, I don't think they're elegant. They've been on the road too long, and it just takes too much effort to maintain appearances when you're always traveling. And besides, their route has been pretty well established, so it's not like they need to impress anyone anymore, right? Okay, so the next thing I have to decide is my character's name and age and any other details that might interest me. I think my character will be Anita, a grey-haired, tough-as-nails woman who has been keeping the business together and the youngsters in line for years. And for years, everyone has been telling her that this trip is too much for her, especially since she always travels by herself. And she didn't listen to their advice until over the last winter. Her granddaughter became pregnant. And when she returns from this trip, her granddaughter's baby will just have been born. And I think she can finally see herself with something to do during the year if she doesn't set off on the route. So I think that's how she came to the decision that this would be her final trip. Okay, so that's a little bit about my character. The next thing that we are going to do, dive into her a little bit further by loading her wagon. So each merchant in the game, or pair of merchants if you're playing with 4 people, has a wagon. And they're going to load this wagon with goods that they're going to buy and sell throughout the game. So I'm going to deal out 4 goods to form the goods array. So we have the sea amber, we have Wojcik's Almanacs, we have stag handle knives, and quill pens. So those are the goods available in Rowstock for What we're going to do now is load this wagon with goods for the journey ahead. And to do this, I'm going to answer questions from the hometown card by choosing a good and then adding a detail. So the first question I'm going to answer is, what good are you excited to finally get your hands on, and who do you owe for it? I think Anita is a very superstitious person. I think she always notes the flights of the storks, and the shapes of the clouds in the sky when making decisions on her journey. And the good that she is excited to get her hands on is Wojcik's Almanac, which is said to tell not just the seasonal knowledge that farmers wish to hear, not just of weather and of rain, but also which seasons are best for the heart, when one should hope for more, when one should gaze at the stars with the eyes of promise upon them. And who she owes for it is none other than Wojcik himself, who she met by random happenstance when ordering a custard donut in Bergner. The two got to talking, and a little wheeling and dealing was done. You know, Anita has her ways. And now a freshly arrived stack of small blue leather-bound books are in her wagon for the journey ahead. The second question I'm going to answer is, what good reminds you of someone else, and why will you miss them so much? I think the good that reminds her of someone else is sea amber, which is collected in the port town of Chorsno. I think her eldest daughter, Miriam, married and moved to Chorsno, has 3 children there that she sees every year. But time in ports is always brief and filled with lists of things that need to be done. And so one never gets the chance one wants to spend time with family. So the wagons are loaded, and it's time for Anita to set out on the road. So the next thing I'm going to do is to construct the map. I'll start by placing a random short road that Anita will be leaving by. Next, I'm going to randomly place the long roads that she will be traveling through. And lastly, the towns. Now, every journey will have 2 inland towns and 2 port towns. Since we are starting in Rowstock, we are going to be visiting our port town first. So I'll be choosing these randomly. What we're going to be doing is making our way around this map from road to road, town to town, till eventually we head back to Rowstock. And each point on the map represents a month of travel. In a full game, you'll go away for 9 months, beginning in spring and then ending when the first cold of winter begins to freeze your bones. If you're playing with 2, 3, or 4 people, you won't all travel together, but rather you will be split over 2 wagons, and you will travel the map, starting at different points. This means that you will pass through the same roads and towns, but at different times. It will give you a chance to see the changes that your fellow merchants made on the towns, and perhaps to see some familiar faces again. But when you experience towns for the second time, they won't be the same, because halfway through the game, the seasons change, bringing with them a new set of considerations and adventures. So, it's time for Anita to set out, and she'll begin by moving to this short road. A cairn marks the boundary. This time, what promise do you make yourself? There is a man in Mursk who comes and goes with the winds, who seems to flow with the tides. His name is Sven. And this year, Anita has promised she will tell him exactly what she thinks of him. She's still making up her mind entirely what that is. But it's complicated. It's salty like the sea, it's warm like ale in winter, and most of all, it comes and goes like the tides. So Anita is going to move on to the first long road, but I'm going to take this short road and add it to her cart, because you always travel with a piece of the road with you. And if I ran out of time during this game and I need to finish early, I can always put down this short road to travel from wherever Anita might be back to Rowstock to wrap up the game. So let's take a look at our first long road. Movement is slow here, as you pick through boggy terrain, testing for firm soil. River crossings pose problems, though the local cows seem to ford them easily. So on long roads, there are two options. I can pick to introspect, which means to reflect on the landscape, or I can choose to interact, which means to have a scene either with another player character or a traveler or item that I've picked up on my journeys. Now, since Anita is currently traveling by herself, my only option is to introspect, and that's just fine. Since Anita is setting out on her final journey, she's got a lot on her mind anyway. So to introspect, I need to answer the question of what does this make you think of and why? I feel like Anita doesn't mind the slow going as she painstakingly drives the wagon around the bogs and through the little paths that creep their ways between them. She watches the cows charge through and end the journey, covered in splattered mud, but content. And she thinks to herself, that's what they call me these days, isn't it? Stuck in the mud, the old stick, unshakable, barely moving. They think I'm too old-fashioned in my ways. But they don't know how it is when you've been on the road for so many years. Things around the place are always changing, yes, and I'm keeping up with this and that, the rise and falls of goods and demand, and what the rich people want, of course, and what the local farmers need. I do my job. But the old ways are valuable. They teach us a wisdom that is greater than that we can imagine in our own time. They're added upon layers of stories told for a purpose through generations. And do I have some stories to tell? And with that, Anita arrives in her first town, the town of Mursk. And since Anita is traveling alone, and this is her first town of the game, I'm going to take one of these special items and traveler cards and place it face down on the town. We'll get to that a bit later. So in each town, there are 4 actions that you must take, and these are the same no matter how many players are in the game. The first of these is arriving in town. So we're going to start with that. I'm going to read the spring and summer description of Mursk. Mursk winds like a nautilus shell into the unending sea. Her priestesses sing hymnals and cast gifted offerings into the salt spray. Sails crowd your view as hulking ships vie for attention. The air clears your lungs. So we're going to add a few more details to this town by choosing goods from the array and using them to answer a question. So the first question is, what good is being brought in by the guild ships? What kind of guild holds unrivaled power here? I feel like the guilds are bringing in plum leather gloves. These are warm, fashionable, and soft. And I think they're not only fashionable, but they are a sensation. The demand for these soft leather gloves, which replace the scratchy and hardened leather of what came before, is through the roof. So they are bringing in enough gloves, not only for Mursk, but to disseminate through the remaining cities at a heavily inflated price while demand lasts. That is because the guilds that hold power here are the clothiers. It began with the priestesses and their growth in number, their need for different ceremonial clothing that could not be obtained here. And then with the new merchant elite of Mursk, who came to this cold place because it is the best way of egress into the wide world of trade. The clothes that are popular here have a purpose. They're not just worn for fashion. They must last. But they too need to make an impact. Because if you want good omens to look your way, then you must capture their attention. The next question is, now refill the goods array. What goods have clearly been here a while, and do you see any potential in them? I think the goods that have been here a while are the stag-handled knives, which are made from naturally shed antlers. They are intricate and curved. And I think that a new law has been passed in Mursk, forbidding those within the city to carry weapons of any kind. The law was only very recently passed when a portside scuffle turned into a deadly brawl. And now the merchants look at their stacks in dismay. They cannot sell these knives here even if they want to. Which of course brings joy to Anita's face. Because if the shopfront merchants cannot sell them, then they must be taken elsewhere. And no doubt they can be bought low and sold high. So that's Anita's arrival in town. Now the next thing that she is going to do here is sell a good. And when you sell a good, it unlocks a unique moment for you to experience. So Anita can either choose to sell the sea amber or to sell Wojcik's almanac. I think Anita thinks that the almanacs will sell better in an inland town, perhaps the wealthy inland town of Bergna that she'll be heading to next. As for the sea amber, well, it's not brought in at Mursk, and there's never enough of it in stock anyway, so she can get a good price for it here. So sea amber, unrefined, cloudy, encased in traces of ancient magic. I'm going to read the moment on this card and answer some questions. If you're playing with more than one person, some of these questions will be answered by others at your table. But since we're playing solo today, I'll be answering these questions myself. Half-completed projects litter a specialized workshop. A pulsating thrum demands your attention. The air is thick with peculiar vibrations. The first question is, what design will the amber complete? The tides near Mursk are treacherous. Sometimes they're joyous. Sometimes they are deadly. Especially at night, when sailors cannot see. So this sea amber will complete the Grand Lighthouse, the tallest built in any port city in this region. By day or by night, the traces of encased magic will reflect the flame of a fire that never dies. An orange beacon spread out across the water. It will soon be a familiar sight. Next question is, how does the magic make you feel? This sea amber is ancient. The magics that are encased within it are sure to be unusual in their nature. How did they come to be there? Why are they locked so deeply within? Releasing them like this in the lighthouse and some sort of output of magnificent power. Well, it's audacious, but it's not for Anita. She prefers the gentle, comforting thrum that comes from the small piece of sea amber woven into the folds of her favorite tunic. Now that's lucky. Okay, so that's selling a good. I will tuck that under the town. Right, so the next thing that Anita is going to get up to in town is some town leisure. So selling goods, buying goods, making deliveries, securing consignments, all of this takes time. And what this phase does is to find out what you are doing in town while all of this is taking place. So to do this, you can choose from either of the town leisure options that are on the goods that you earlier chose for this city, or if you like, you can set your own scene. Ordinarily, town leisure will be a scene that you play out with another player, but since we're playing the solo game, we're going to do them as a vignette, the same way we sold a good. And there is an option here That is just perfect for this situation, given what I mentioned before about a certain man called Sven, and that is the plum leather gloves, town leisure option, first love. You find an old flame browsing among the wares at the marketplace. When was the last time you saw each other? 2 years ago. But one could hardly call it seeing each other, because Anita was stood upon the dock. She looked up at the mighty hulking ship leaving the port of Mursk, and on its bow was a familiar face, grizzled with greying hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that never seems to fade. But it was pulling rapidly out of view. Just my luck, thought Anita. What are they looking for at the market? I feel like Sven has just arrived in Mursk and does not yet know about the ban on the carrying of weapons, and so is trying to get himself a stag-handled knife. They're very perplexed at the fact that none of the vendors who sell them seem to be present in the marketplace. Anita's eyes meet Sven. Sven's eyes meet Anita. She says, "Something tells me you're not going to find what you're looking for." He embraces her. "You old thing. Still making the yearly rounds. When will I ever stop?" says Anita, knowing very well that she is about to stop. The two are caught up in conversation. It's the same every time. The glorious, free-flowing tumbling of words that can only happen with someone you know, almost like your own heartbeat. They make their way from the marketplace to an eating house, from the eating house to the tavern, from the tavern to the pier, looking at the sunset. Will you be off again soon? Well, that's a question that they both ask each other. And then Anita broaches the subject, settling down. Has he ever thought about it? He laughs. No, and I wager you haven't either. My ship leaves tomorrow. Anita watches the sunset. Well, it was the perfect moment to have that conversation, she thinks. And the evening ends. Not unhappily, but as unresolved as ever. Okay, that's town leisure. So the last thing that happens in town is that Anita needs to buy a good to sell later on in her journey. And the two options here are the stag handle knives and the plum leather gloves. And Anita reckons she can get a really good price for these knives in Gredzow, because there's a lot of unsavory characters in that area who might be looking for them, not to mention the fact that they're very cheap here. So I'll load those onto her card. Now, ordinarily, that would be the end of what you do in a town. But because this is Anita's first town and she is traveling alone, she now has the option to pick up a special item or traveler. So let's flip this over and see what she finds. Okay, it is the Seeker's Glass, heavy and full of visions. Its destination, somewhere that appreciates magic. Well, Anita can't pass up a once-in-a-lifetime sale like this. So the question is, where does she find it? I feel that is how her and Sven end up passing ways. Because they are, after all, themselves. Heading back from the pier after sunset, an unusual stall catches her eye. Unmarked, no sign, no trading company to speak of, and everything there seems old, dusty, and a little out of sorts. Not to mention the fact that it's terribly organized. Well, Anita rummages around. She finds this, and the piece of sea amber sewn into her favorite tunic. Is attracted to it immediately. But the shop attendant doesn't seem too concerned. The price is just what you might expect for an old mirror, and so she takes it with her on her journey. All right, that's Anita's time in Mursk, so we're back on the road again. Thick morning mist cautions each step. Damp leaves crunch under wheels. Alone in the forest, black stalks hum a repertoire of quiet odes to solitude. And now I have a choice, either for Anita to introspect, think about what she's traveling through, or to interact, perhaps with a certain enchanted mirror that she just picked up. And since I just got this mirror, I am definitely going to choose to interact. So there are 3 prompts on the mirror for me to choose from. And ordinarily, I would choose one of these prompts and then it would be completed by another player. But since I'm playing solo, I'm going to finish it off myself. I think I'm going to choose this one. An image swells within. It's someone who greatly desires the seeker's glass. They speak. I think what Anita sees is the familiar, intricate sigils, eccentric yellows, and pointed apparel that could only belong to one of Grezzo's tide witches. Well, I suppose if you find out a mirror is magic, it's not surprising to find a tide witch on the other end of it. They speak. Who are you? How did you find this? Anita tells them truthfully. Bring it to Grezzo. I'll pay you for it well. I have something better to offer you than coin. And with that, the mirror swells again. The tide witch fades from view. Anita taps the mirror. Just a mirror. Well, you can't say no to opportunity. This may be her last year on the road, but it's certainly not going to be a quiet one. And with that, she continues down the road and arrives in the town of Bergner. So that's all we're going to play through in our solo game today. However, I do want to give you a glimpse into what would happen next in a full game. Once we finish in the town of Bergner, we will be halfway through our journey, which means autumn comes. And when autumn comes, each of these long roads is flipped from the summer side to the autumn side. And when we arrive in town, we'll no longer use the spring and summer section, but instead we will use the autumn section to find out what happens. Once I've completed all the towns, or at any time Anita decides she wants to head home, I put down my short road, flipped onto the autumn side, and head back to Raustock. Hazy shapes become familiar, almost home. Did you fulfill your promise to yourself? Well, we know Anita didn't get a chance to do that yet, but who knows what would have happened if we'd gone the whole way around. Once home, you'll reunite with your fellow merchants, say hello to your family for the half-fire traders, and do one last thing. Narrate a little vignette that shows us what happens to your character during winter until they set out once again in spring upon the road, or in Anita's case, until her great-grandchild is born. That's how a game of solo Saltfish works. I hope you enjoyed seeing that. And check out our Kickstarter for Little Box Journeys, or if that's done, you can find the game and the other Little Box games on our website. I'll put the links below. Cheerio